Welcome to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're doing predictions for the second day of the third stage of the NAL's 2022 season. So one day in the books, and a bunch to go. The second day coming up today, right? So back-to-back days every week except for the final week. So let's quickly go over the previous day and my predictions. So I got 3 out of 5, not terrible. Maybe could have got like one more right. I think it was pretty unrealistic with the results to have gotten 5 out of 5. If you did, kudos to you. Oxygen got taken down by Parabellum. Got this one wrong. I did say I wouldn't be super surprised if Parabellum took the victory, but I expected Oxygen to, and so I went with them. And Oxygen didn't look as good as I thought they would, and Parabellum looked better than I thought they would. I think Border was an interesting choice. I think it was a bit of an ego challenge by Oxygen, and they lost out. So Parabellum pretty promising going forward, and Oxygen it really brought into question their roster change. But again, just one game. We'll have to see what actually happens. Astralis versus Dark Zero. This was a Dark Zero victory. I got this one right. I felt like maybe Astralis was the slightly more popular pick, but this one definitely could go either way. And I think this evens up their map counts against each other between NAL and the Major to 4-4. So, right, Dark Zero took a narrow game. This puts Dark Zero at the very bottom of the teams that won because they're the only team that won in overtime. Every other team that won in regulation. So they have a tiny bit of catching up to do, but of course it is just 1 point. This also puts Astralis as the only team on 1 point, so above all of the other teams that lost. And so yeah, close game on Theme Park. If I saw the map before I made the prediction, I might have gone with Astralis, so I'm glad, I guess, for this one that that wasn't the case. Yeah, Dark Zero victory. TSM took down Mirage, and Mirage, I thought maybe they were going to look pretty good, maybe give them a little bit more time, but well, for the time being, they don't look great. And the pickups for TSM did look quite good. Again, this is against Mirage, but with, I think it was Gasher was like 10-6, Snake was 9-5, pretty good score lines to put up in your Pro League debut. So not too much to say here. We'll see how each of these teams fare going forward. XSET versus Beast Coast, and this was the biggest beatdown of the day, a 7-2, and I think it was even like 2-2 at one point. XSET calls a timeout, and then they win all 5 rounds in a row. Beast Coast never called the timeout, if I remember right, and well, they don't have a coach standing behind them because their coach is playing for them. So I guess maybe it would have just benefited XSET more than it would have benefited them, but okay, a beatdown as expected with Beast Coast having having sort of a new roster and not even being able to play with that full roster because of visa issues. And then XSET, I think, still the best looking team in the league. They are technically at the very top of the scoreboard with 3 points and the best round differential, but again, we'll see how they do against an opponent that's not Mirage or Beast Coast. And then finally, Sonics versus SSG. I went with SSG, got this one wrong, so I got the middle 3 right, and I got the first and the last ones wrong, unfortunately. It was a close game. It was a 7-5 victory for Sonics. We went to Skyscraper, so I think a little bit of a pocket pick for Sonics. They haven't played it since, I think, the first game of was it last stage or the first stage? It was the beginning of one of the stages when they got crushed by Astralis, and I guess maybe it was the first stage, I want to say. But anyways, that gives Sonics a really nasty streak against SSG. I think they've beaten them in every NAL game that they played except for one, which was like the second one last day. So I think between 2022, the only one that they won, if I'm remembering right, the only one that SSG won was stage 2 of last year. So in stage 1 of last year, Sonics won, and then in the last 4, including this game, the Sonics won. So pretty close games, most of them, if not all of them. And so I thought it could have gone SSG's way, especially with with more changes coming out for Sonics, but no, they do manage to take it down, and a good start for them. SSG, pretty disappointing, one more round, and they could have at least gotten a point on the board, but we'll have to see what they can do moving forward. So let's talk about today's predictions. TSM versus Beast Coast feels like an easy one to go with TSM. Same sort of thing for Beast Coast. They're not playing with their full roster, and it's really hampering their performance. And then TSM, although they were playing against Mirage, they did look pretty solid, taking it down 7-3, if I remember right. So I'm going to go with TSM there. And then XSET versus Parabellum. So I'm still going to go with XSET, but after the performance Parabellum put up against Oxygen, I think it's much closer than, especially if, say XSET won and Parabellum lost. Both of these teams did win. But again, still going to go with XSET. I think they went like all 15 rounds last stage, and I think didn't Parabellum win, but it was like early in the stage and it was online. It was just a bunch of weird stuff. But for the time being, it still seems like XSET is the best team in the league. But if Parabellum take them down, and especially handily, you might have to give that to Parabellum, even though, of course, that's just after 2 best of ones. It's maybe even still a bit hasty to say, but for just all intents and purposes, maybe you could say that. And just comparing who they played against, yeah, Parabellum took down Oxygen, and so much more impressive than Exet taking down Beast Coast, but Exet didn't really have any, they didn't break a sweat. It was 7-2, it was decisive, and then Parabellum, it was still 7-4, and so I guess, not even max regulation, but they had to clutch some rounds out, and maybe it's just a few too many mistakes from Oxygen. So again, even though Parabellum looked good, I think part of it was Oxygen slipping up, allowing them to win. Maybe even just a few fewer mistakes. Oxygen could have gone to overtime and won from there. So I'll go with Exet on the second game, but another case where I wouldn't be super surprised to see a Parabellum victory. Third game, Astralis versus Mirage. So we get the number 1 team versus the number 10 team over the course of the season. Of course, both these teams suffered a loss in the first day. Again, Astralis on 1 point and Mirage on no points thus far. Obviously go with Astralis. They did take a loss, but it was still against a solid team, and it was a very close game going to overtime. Mirage suffered a loss to the second lowest team on the standings overall in the season, TSM. And so, just a no-brainer pick. Obviously, everybody's going to go with Astralis here, and this would be a pretty massive upset for Mirage to win. But I don't think it's impossible. Again, I think there is a decent amount of potential on this roster, so we'll have to see what happens. Sonics versus Dark Zero. The last two are definitely the two tough ones to call. I'd be very shocked if I miss 2 of these, and maybe even if I miss one of the, well, I guess again this one, if I miss 2 of these, I'd be very surprised. So I'm expecting at least 2 out of 3 there, so hopefully I can get at least one of these 2. So Sonics versus Dark Zero, they played each other in the finals of NAL, like the NAL finals, the final matchup, and Sonics took it down. I guess not terribly significant now. That was like almost a year ago, and a different meta, different format. That was best of 3. I don't think they played a best of 5, best of 3, I want to say. And again, Sonics took it down. In their recent meetings, they are 1-1. So in stage 1, it was a Dark Zero victory, and in stage 2, it was a Sonics victory. I don't think either of them were especially close. It was like a 7-4 and a 7-3 or something. So not too much to go off of there. I guess the Sonics win is the more recent one, and so will they continue that? Does that give them a leg up? Does that give Dark Zero more information on Sonics? Do keep in mind that Sonics making 2 roster changes, Dark Zero not making any, and it didn't seem 100% seamless for Sonics. I think Geo was pretty good in his roles, and then Gunner got off to a little bit of a slow start, but ended up being fine enough, and it really was the trio, especially Grixer, as it very often is, doing big work on the Sonics. He went 16-6. At one point, I think he was like 1-3. So from that point on, he went like 15-3. So great game from him, as most of his games are. And I think a good showing also from Rexon and Kansan, 11-5, 11-6. And so I think in this game, I am going to go with Sonics. It's just a little bit of I don't know. It's just a pick. It is what it is. I definitely think this one could go either way. I feel like Dark Zero is maybe the slightly more popular pick here. And just based off the first day's result, it's tough to call. It was an 8-6 victory for Dark Zero, 7-5 victory for Sonics. I think you'd probably call the victory over Astralis more impressive than the victory over Space Station for the time being, but I guess Dark Zero did drop a point in their game. So whatever, maybe I think if anything, Sonics are the slight underdog, but it's a pretty even seeming matchup on paper. I'm gonna go with Sonics here though. And then Oxygen versus Space Station final game. So this is another matchup that usually runs pretty close. I said this for Sonics, but every matchup Oxygen and Space Station has gone at least 12 rounds, except for stage 2 of last year. So and Space Station are actually on a pretty nasty streak on Oxygen. So Oxygen won in round 15 in stage 1 of last year, and then SSG's won all of the rest of them. They won 7-1, and then they won 7-5 the next 3 times. So stage 3 of last year and stages 1 and 2 of this year, SSG won exactly 7-5. So I predicted, I guess I wasn't completely thinking about this. Sonics was on the streak against SSG, and they ended up continuing it. I predicted against it. So partially because I sort of do want to, I don't know, I do like to predict the team that I want to win, which in this case is Space Station. And I don't think it's not like there's no reason to predict them. They just seem to have a leg up on Oxygen in the matchup, and I guess both teams making a change. Yeti coming onto Space Station, Sweater coming onto Oxygen, and I want to say it seemed like Yeti slotted into SSG a little bit better. He was having a really rough game. I think he salvaged it a little bit. And then on Oxygen, just Sweater on the particular roles he was playing seemed a little bit weird. So yeah, I'm just gonna go with Space Station here, and I feel like they're also sort of the underdogs. I mean, if you look at last stage's performances, 3rd place for Oxygen and in 9th place for SSG. If you look at the stage before that, 2nd place for Oxygen, 5th place for SSG. So they've definitely outplaced them pretty heavily. They've gone to both majors, Oxygen that is, and Space Station has gone to neither. But in this case, I'm going to predict that Space Station will continue their victory streak. And yeah, so that's what I'm going to go with. And so I'll read them down the line one more time. I have TSM over Beast Ghost, Xset over Parabellum, Astralis over Mirage, Sonics over Dark Zero, and Space Station over Oxygen. So if you have your own predictions, feel free to let me know. And I guess if you noticed any curiosities on the first day, probably what I'll do is like a weekly recap. So before I'd been doing a recap for every play day, I think I'll just do it like once a week. Maybe I'll even talk about some of the other regions. So maybe on the weekend I'll do that sort of thing. But okay, I guess I'll keep the prediction videos rolling. Other than that, any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, corrections, any of that, leave it below. A like and a subscription would also be very much appreciated. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.